Well, welcome back to What, Why, God. And today we are lucky to have a scientist with us. She is a biochemist, and we will be asking the question, are science and faith compatible? And so, Molly, you just struck me as just a wonderful person to talk to about this because you have a definite, like, solid faith, but you're also solidly a scientist as well. And so, so have you been a Christian and interested in science your whole life? We just talked about this a little bit. So how do you answer that question?
Well, I've been a Christian all my life. I was raised in, my parents' church, and so certainly Christian background. And I became interested in science in 7th grade when my grandfather died of cancer,
Oh, okay.
and he was taken pretty quickly, and it was pretty brutal. So that because math and science were coming pretty easy to me even back then, I just wanted to cure cancer. So that's how I got into
Well,
science.
that is noble. I love it.
I didn't succeed.
Well, I think a lot of people are still battling that one.
Yeah.
So, how has your studying and of science impacted your faith and your understanding of science and religion and Christianity, how that all goes together?
Well, I think for everybody that kind of interaction is unique. For me, it didn't impact my faith at all. I already had faith, and it was more of a worship of God.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, if you look at the biochemical mechanisms and how complex they are, how much of the page is taken up by, just the mechanisms, all the enzymes and cofactors, they have to come together. Everything that we studied is so complex that it is a great and wonderful creator that designed, yeah.
Yeah, and you could see that based on your studies.
Yes.
There are scientists that claim that the origin of life can be explained by a millennia of random chemical reactions. And non-Christians may not be prepared to address this particular theory. So how do you see that claim?
Well, the fact that they've been working for 70 years on the premortal soup and have come up with absolutely nothing is a good indication. When you look at all the other fields of science that have, and the advances that have taken place in 70 years, you could list all sorts of things, the internet and just amazing advances. They've done nothing. So it seems to be relatively impossible to do. So that's certainly a good beginning to talk about it. Like you were saying, another term that has been used for this discussion is called irreducible complexity.
Okay.
In other words, it's like a Rube Goldberg process that, one influences the next all the way down the line. For this, like for example, for sight, there's 9 different proteins after a photon hits the retina. There's 9 different proteins that, change as they go and they interact with each other all the way down the line before that neuron is actually sent to the signal to the brain to perceive sight. So it's very complex. It's not at all a simple process. Darwin tried to introduce the idea of sight by saying that, well, starfish can perceive where light comes from based on where it hits a little spot on their tissue. So it evolved from that. Of course, Darwin didn't know anything about DNA or biochemistry or amino acids or any of that. So, but he just waves it away with the term evolve, and it really can't. All of those 9 proteins have to come into play together. They have to be there together at the same time, in the same proximity. And the probability that one of those proteins could possibly occur by random mutations, that, is the theory of evolution. Any one of those proteins, it's 1 × 10 to the 150th. It's a huge number. And of course, when
Which
you have
probably fill this room.
if you have 9 of those proteins, as any statistician knows, you have to multiply each of those probabilities together. So now you have 9 times 150, and I forgot to do that math. But is a very large exponent,
Yeah.
you know?
It's just highly unlikely, and that's
Yes.
just for one thing, just for
Right.
sight alone.
Right.
And
And then you add all of the other processes. Sight isn't, truly essential for life, but all the life essential things just to have a living organism, you multiply all those probabilities together, and it's astounding. And in fact, the four big, they call them the four horsemen of atheists. They're infamous in their a denial of God. They say that that's the one question that trumps them up, is the probabilities are so unlikely that it would take, and they've said the word miracle,
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
Francis Crick, the discoverer of DNA, he actually, first he said it was, 10 years after he got his Nobel Prize, he said it was, aliens.
I've
Then
heard
he
that.
recanted.
They happened on the backs of crystals.
Yes.
I heard
And
that
then,
once too.
then he got around to finally saying, well, there was a designer, but he specifically said it's not a deity. So he's just philosophically opposed to God, but he's
Yeah.
not using any scientific thoughts
Yeah.
to describe
Yeah.
how this actually occurs.
Science is about, when it first started, was started through Christianity. A
Oh,
lot of it was
absolutely,
started
yes.
through Christianity to not negate God, but to understand him better. And
Right.
I love that,
Yes,
because
yeah.
as a scientist, I'm sure that as a Christian, you just kind of explained that at the beginning.
Yeah,
Right.
and Galileo ran into difficulties, because he wanted to say that the Earth wasn't the center of our universe; it's the sun. And but he tried to convince people that it's not. And I love the quote. He said, "It's the important thing is how we go to heaven, not how the heavens go." And of course, that's a rough translation of what he said. But
Yeah.
that the important thing is, God and his relationship with humans, and then we just study his creation in a scientific world. So
Yeah, we
they
study
don't
the
have to
how
be at opposed to each
at
other at
odds.
all. Yeah,
Yeah, and I remember somebody saying too, it's we study the how, not the why.
absolutely.
And you
Yeah,
can't get the why from science.
you'll never crank that in your calculator.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Molly. I so appreciate you being here. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to like and share this, and have a great rest of your day.